Deep sea exploration has really shown us that we only know so little about the underwater world. If you've seen my other videos, you're probably aware of the many creatures that live down there, both more toward the surface and also deeper down below. Some of those creatures and amazing things have only been discovered by divers who are brave enough to go to the darkest parts of the ocean. And honestly, a lot of these creatures were pretty scary and probably threatening. However, there are way more creepy things down at the bottom of the ocean. Today we'll be looking at 10 terrifying objects found in the deep sea. Number 10. The Three Friends. Okay, yeah, so the first thing on my list is actually not an object, but still, it's a pretty scary thing that happened. It all began when a group of 3 friends went out on a night dive. It was already 1 a.m. in the morning, which means that it was very late at night, and of course, very dark. There were no other people around. Usually, these friends would go on dives this late just so they could check out the bioluminescence that certain underwater species reveal only when it gets that dark. It all seemed cool, until the friends spotted a 4th person in their circle. Now, this wouldn't scare anyone staying at a dive resort, but they're sure that there were no other guests in the water. In fact, divers rarely go alone on this kind of adventure due to all the dangers that might be out there. They swear this 4th person had a wounded leg, but didn't get close enough to help or figure out who this person was. All they know is that they were 100 feet underwater at a time when no one else was supposed to be there. Pretty creepy. Number 9. Spiders that breathe underwater. There are a lot of creepy unknown creatures that live in the ocean, but there's one that a lot of you might not like already. The diving bell spider. So yeah, if you're afraid of spiders on land, you're probably also going to be afraid of them on the ocean, as this spider is able to swim and breathe and probably bite underwater. The most bizarre fact about this spider is that it can capture bubbles from the surface of the water and traps the air in its webs. This is done so it can simply breathe. This allows the spider to stay in the water for as long as it wants, with a few visits to the surface every now and then. So, if you thought you could get rid of spiders once you're inside the water, I'm afraid to tell you that is not gonna be the case. You can never escape. Number 8. The oldest computer. Kids these days, am I right? They're never gonna know how uncommon computers were back in the day. And we didn't use them for any fangled video games, we used them to pay taxes. Probably. God, I feel old just by saying that. But it is true, computers were not that common prior to the 90s. Now, did you know when the oldest computer was invented? Well, apparently it was around 2,000 years ago. And at the beginning of the 20th century, a group of fishermen came across a shipwreck at the bottom of the sea. It was found off the coast of the Greek island called Antikythera. Finally, in 1902, the ship was excavated and people found what we came to know as the oldest computer ever. Apparently, the device was made between the years 270 BC, and it was called the Antikythera mechanism. This analog device helped people predict eclipses and other astronomical positions decades in advance. It sounds like whoever created this was way ahead of their time, and I can only imagine what people would think of our inventions 100 years from now. However, there is one question we have to ask about this oldest computer. Can it run Crysis? Number 7. The USS Greyback. With so many shipwrecks in history, it shouldn't surprise us that at least one of them made it to this list. The story behind this wreck is very impressive, as it was only discovered very recently. And it's not just an old ship we're talking about, it's the USS Greyback. This was a US submarine that failed to return safely after departing from Pearl Harbor during World War II. It was carrying 80 sailors and it was known as the most successful ship of its time. Originally, they thought the submarine had gone down around 100 miles from Okinawa, but no one was able to find it. It was only until 2018 when a group of researchers started to look into the records and found out that a Japanese combat submarine had taken down an American ship back in the day, leaving no survivors. Later in 2019, undersea explorer Tim Taylor and his team were able to find the shipwreck. This was with the help of an underwater drone that's capable of scanning the sea floor. They were able to find the long-lost USS Greyback and finally provided closure to the families of these 80 sailors who had always wondered what happened to them more than 70 years ago. Number 6. The Apollo Moon Mission Rocket. The 20th century certainly gave us a new perspective on exploration. People were finally able to fly, and not just across different countries, but even to outer space. And in 1969, humanity was finally able to step on the moon. This happened when Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin completed their Apollo moon mission landing. But what happened to the rocket they used? Well, back in 2013, Amazon's Jeff Bezos set on an expedition to recover pieces of this spaceship that were scattered all over the Atlantic Ocean. The expedition team found them at around 14,000 feet underwater, and they were later given to the Seattle's Museum of Flight in 2015. I think it's a great thing that they found the pieces of this rocket, as they'll always remind us of that first flight to the moon. Number 5. Train wrecks. Well, a shipwreck and the remains of a space rocket make sense for this list, but a train? How does a train make it to the bottom of the ocean? Well, that's what a lot of people began to wonder as they found 2 rare trains from the year 1850 in the bottom of the ocean, just off the shore of New Jersey. The whole thing is very odd, as there were no records that reported trains like these getting lost, let alone being built. I mean, I guess reports and keeping track of things were a bit different back in the 50s, but wouldn't someone have said something? The one thing experts figured out, though, is that the trains probably were victims to a powerful storm while they were being transported across the Atlantic Ocean. It's been more than 160 years since these trains made it to the bottom of the ocean. They're a bit rusted, but surprisingly, they're still well preserved. Whether they work or not, I'm not really sure. Number 4. A UFO. Back in 2014, a group of Swedish divers found an object that certainly does look like a UFO. When describing it, they said it looked like the Millennium Falcon from Star Wars. Now, there was a lot of people who, of course, were skeptical about this finding, especially since there was no clear pictures or proper documentation of it. However, part of the reason they couldn't take a photo or get more documentation of this thing is because any electronic gadget would stop working as soon as they got 200 meters of the object. Once they moved far from it, their gadgets would begin working again. They also noted a sort of runway that led to the object, which could indicate that it skidded along the path before making a full stop. However, that's not all. During a second expedition, they found a second object and they even got a sonar image of it, recorded with the same device they used to find shipwrecks. Unfortunately, the image came out a bit blurry, but a lot of people are convinced that this thing is either a UFO or a portal into another world. Honestly, with all the strange stuff surrounding these objects, I can totally see how people draw these conclusions. What do you think of it? I guess only time will tell. Hopefully. Number 3. A sunken city. I'm sure you've heard of Atlantis, and there are tons of theories about the existence and fate of this legendary sunken city. But while Destiny brings an answer to that, there's a sunken city that we can actually talk about right now. That being Xichang, China, also known as Lion City. This Chinese version of Atlantis was once a political and economical center in the eastern province of Zhejiang. However, back in '59, the Chinese government decided to flood the city in order to create a hydroelectric power station, while keeping the city intact at 130 feet underwater. Nowadays, the city is at the bottom of the turquoise Qiandao Lake. I guess this city is not necessarily a mysterious or random find like most of the other things on this list, but we gotta admit, it'd be pretty cool to explore a city that's completely submerged underwater. Kinda like traveling back in time. Now it's time for the day's best pick. What would you do if you ever go on a diving trip and you find something mysterious or creepy at the bottom of the ocean? How would you react? I kinda wonder what people thought when they first saw the object in the picture I chose for today, though. I mean, sure, some things are quite expected, like shipwrecks and strange little creatures like those underwater spiders. Ugh. But some things were really not supposed to be at the bottom of the sea. Let's check out the 2 things at the top of this list with number 2. A fleet of battleships. Operation Hailstone was also known as Japan's Pearl Harbor. It happened over the course of 2 days during World War II back in 1944. During this event, hundreds of battleships, aircrafts, and submarines sank to the bottom of the ocean as the Japanese fleet was attacked by the Americans. On that day, the Japanese army lost thousands of soldiers and their military fleet remained missing until the year of 1960, when the legendary explorer Jacques Cousteau explored the area and found the sunk artifacts of this historical event. Now the place is known as Truck Lagoon, and it's one of the world's weirdest attractions. Would you ever explore a place like this? I feel like going to an underwater museum. Probably filled to the brim with ghosts as well. Before we move on, do me a favor. My analytics show that only about 15% of you watching are actually subscribed. Come on guys, what's up with that? Can you guys please hit the subscribe button? You guys watch my videos every day anyway, so you might as well subscribe and keep up to date with every video we put out. Number 1. And most terrifyingly of all, random skeletons. Welcome to the Bone Zone! Right, Halloween spirit, wrong month though. Finding skeletons in the water is not something that's necessarily extraordinary. Yeah, sure, it's pretty creepy for sure, but usually the skeletons do have explanations. Shipwrecks, drownings, and all sorts of accidents lead people to these terrible ends. Sometimes the victims go missing for a while until someone finally finds their whereabouts, which brings closure to relatives and close friends alike. However, these are skeletons that don't have a clear explanation behind them, like the ones at the bottom of Lake Rup Kund in the Indian Himalayas. They were about 1,200 years old when a British explorer found them in 1942. The origins of these skeletons is unknown, but the most bizarre thing is that their location is way far from any settlement that could have ever existed. Some people believe they were soldiers, others think they were victims to a natural disaster, and others think they were part of a mass suicide mission. I guess the mystery will remain though. One thing's for sure, I don't think I'd want to find any of these skeletons on my diving trips. What about you? How do you feel about these objects? How would you react if you ever saw one of these things while exploring the bottom of the ocean or a lake? Let us know in the comment section down below. With all that said and done, that's our video for today, folks, and I will see you all next time. Later, everybody.